My name is Keith Whalen from RPI Consultants. I want to thank you for taking the time to attend this webinar today on RQC Best Practices. We have two excellent presenters, our Supply Chain Practice Manager, Ms. Stephanie Kowal, and Supply Chain Consultant, Brittany Degler. That's Brittany with two T's, for those of you wondering at home.
Not Britney Spears.
Not Britney Spears. They're very passionate about RQC and the capabilities of making a really robust a product that your customer interacts with, your business owners. And this is a very excellent presentation. We hope you'll enjoy it. First, we have a couple of housekeeping notes before I hand it over. Most important, we will be recording this webinar. It takes us a few days to get rendered and ready and up on YouTube. 7 to 10 days, we'll send you a follow-up email. Also, if you have questions, please type them into the GoToWebinar questions module, and we'll ask them throughout the presentation. It helps break up the dynamic a little bit. And lastly, follow us on Digital Concourse. You'll find all of our videos there and much more. And with that, I give you Ms. Degler and Ms. Kowal.
All right, well, we'll get started. We've already been introduced, so we'll just get right in the thick of things. Before we really get in the thick of things, though, just a little bit about RPI. We were founded in 1999. We've got headquarters based here in Baltimore, Maryland, though we're rapidly expanding, so we've actually got offices in Kansas City and a tech office that's newly opened in Tampa. And we've got about 60 plus consultants nationwide with certifications across the board in Lawson and Infor. So we are here to help you. If you've got questions, we've got answers. So let's get started.
Great. So for today's agenda, we're going through a lot. I'm sure a lot of you have seen our RQC Best Practices before, but we've switched it up this time. Brittany is here joining me. We're going to focus on RQC overview and get into some of the details of the configuration. Then we'll go into some special features, focus on some requisition approvals, then go into a typical project approach and best practices.
So what is Requisition Center? Requisition Center is a user-friendly interface that requesters can use separate from the RQ10 screen that you're used to using from Portal, or if you're in version 10 in Mingle. It's very user-friendly. I can equate it to Amazon. It's not Amazon level, but we're getting there. But it's Amazon in Lawson, essentially. It's making the requesting process for the users very user-friendly. You can order inventory items. You can order special items that aren't maintained in Lawson. And you can also use Punch-Out, and we'll describe all of those later on in the presentation. It's something where you've got all the information at your fingertips, and it's really a useful tool. So to start off, this is just an image of your RQ10. So this is kind of the behind-the-scenes detailed version of Requisition. Requisition Center itself is the next screen. And this is an example. You can search for items in here any which way you want. We've got templates, express orders, special service, and search catalog, all things that we will describe a little more in depth. Special service is when you don't have something in Lawson and you need to enter it ad hoc. But as you can see, it's very easy to use. It's a little easier than RQ10. More user-friendly as we've gone over. And you've got your shopping cart over on the right-hand side over there. And so it's very nice, and it's nice and robust, and you've got a lot of options.
So how's the setup? It's pretty basic. There's a few separate screens that you need to set up, one being your ICO1 company. There is a Requisition Center tab, and here's where you drive what your requesters are going to have access to. So whether or not they have access to search the catalog, or if you're just utilizing things called templates, whether or not you want to allow special service. And then there's also some additional configurations on what types of items that they see that we'll get into a little bit later. So here is where you configure the requisition approval type, whether or not you're utilizing IPA or you're not requiring approvals at all. Then on the requester area, here's where you configure which requesters have access to what. And you also can override some of the setup that's done in ICO1. So if you use ICO1 to default all of the requester tasks that are available, catalog search, template, special service, you can choose at the requester level to give just that requester access to things called like punch out. And then we also have some of the account units that they need access to.
So this is the RQ4, excuse me. Before we were on the main tab, now this is the accounting tab. And you've got the option of allowing your requesters to have specific accounting units. They need to match your requesting location, whatever's assigned to the requester, in order to work properly. However, if you would like, you can also leave this completely wide open, and that allows the requester to access whatever accounting units are available. And then they can pick and choose whatever's convenient for them and whatever's applicable to their requisition.
So this looks a little bit different in 10 than it does in 9, and I believe this is version 10.06, which they've added some additional features there with some feedback from US customers. So now there's a validation option, so basically you can change that to disallowed accounting units. So if you only have a few that you don't want any requester to purchase from, you can configure it that way instead, so by exception. But they've also added in this distribution company where before you kind of had to trick the system and add multiple headers by a requester if you were a multi-company setup. So it's not just RQ04 that you need to set up. You actually need to go into the RM record in Lawson Security or even ISS to add the requester identity. So this identity must match the requester ID in RQ04. Digging into the RQC config file. So this is another area that's required as part of setup. So you have your ICO1, your RQ04, your RQ01s for your requesting locations. And of course, if you have item masters, all of that needs to be fully vetted out. But behind the scenes, there's a configuration file that can be utilized to further customize your requester's experience. So again, those are your customers, your end user, so just optimizing the process as much as you can has a lot of benefit, to have your customers engage more in the process and get rid of those paper requisitions moving around. So you can change your theme. Again, if you're not on version 10, if you're on the latest and greatest version of RQC, you can change your theme from the 9 look and feel with the gradient background to the nice crisp look and feel of the white and blue. You also can remove or require fields. So we see a lot of customers do that for requested delivery because it doesn't do what you think it's going to do, and priority for the same reason. If you don't have any kind of workflow process for those priority requisitions, you likely want to hide that so the requester doesn't think it's going to be treated any differently. You also can allow the requester to update their company on the detail profile tab. So again, if you're multi-company, even if you have RQ04 set up where they can order for multiple companies, you actually have to update it in the RQC config file to allow for that company dropdown. Otherwise, it's just going to default for what their default company is in their requester record in RQ04. Then another thing that's really exciting is when you're ordering special service, there is a special configuration called special item validation. And I feel like this is often forgotten about. If you implemented RQC many years ago, it may have not worked in an earlier version. I believe it came in 901 where they added this special item validation. So if you implemented RQC before that, you might have missed this. But basically, if you have it at skip, you do not want to have it as skip. You will at least want to have it as worn. So if the requester types in a part number, manufacturer number, vendor catalog number in that item number field, and it matches a record in your item master or your PO item vendor, PO 13, it will notify the requester, hey, we found a match. Is this the item that you're looking for? So they're actually going to request it through your item master record and default all the count unit information and all the coding that you want. But if you have it as skip, it's just going to ignore that and process it as a special service. So definitely recommend looking at that. I haven't seen deny work very well because it's a hard stop for the requester. It won't let them to continue. And as you know, sometimes manufacturers share that same part number. So it may not be the item that they're actually looking for and can cause a breakdown in the process. They can still ignore and say that that's not the match that they were looking for and order the same item, but we'll get into best practice with managing those items later on in the presentation. You're also able to confirm the deletion of items. Trash can will show up in the requisition lines area, and maybe they hit it by accident, so it says, are you sure you want to delete? So you can configure that here. You also can show an alert if they're closing out of Requisition Center shopping and they haven't released their requisition yet. It can give a message there too to notify them. There is some configuration integration with MSCM that you can utilize that will bring in receiving and delivery tracking information. So if they're an MSCM user, they can hover their mouse. It's a special icon and it will show some additional details. And then also within the RQC config file, a lot of stuff in here.
All in one.
Is where you configure punch out. So there's some IT components of how it's connecting to that punch out vendor that all need to be configured within the RQC config file. That's a whole lot of detail about RQC config.
All right, so on to sort of the setup of Requisition Center. We've talked about the behind the scenes setup, but this is also something that you want to consider is the keyword search setup. And this is very helpful and very beneficial to your requesters, because what it's doing is it's providing alternate terms for keywords that you've entered in a variety of different descriptions or manufacturing numbers, different fields related to your items, so that when your requester is searching for an item, they have an autocomplete function. Think of it that way, kind of like Google, where you start typing something in like cath for catheter. If you start typing in CATH, it'll finish your sentence and decide, hey, is this what you're looking for? Or do you want to keep going? Do you want to move back? Something like that. So this is the setup, and you can actually decide what fields that the keyword search actually looks into in order to pull that information and decide if they're synonyms or not. And you can see here we've got a few used at the top. We're not using purchasing classes and inventory class, so there's no need to look at those for this particular setup. And it keeps going the same way. And keep using the page down function, because there are a lot of fields.
Yeah, there sure are. And, it depends on who you are as an organization and where you're storing your information. But we found, especially if you're bringing on a new hospital, maybe they're on an older system, have their own item numbers that they're used to, and trying to get them to catch on to the Lawson numbers. We've seen those legacy item numbers stored in a user field, and you actually can turn this keyword on here, and then they can search by their old item number and find the item match. So again, can really help with that customer experience. And another thing to add is once you've upgraded to version 10, you now have that really awesome third description of 350 characters.
Carries all throughout the module.
Yeah. And if you are using data links or Nuvia, you may just take their full description and bring it into your item master. Well, don't forget there's now a new keyword here that you should turn on and show that you want to use it. One thing to remember is when you do change these flags, you want to start using them, it doesn't stop there. You have to run an IC800 to find all those keywords again. So basically the IC800's going to look through IC11, PO13, it's going to find all those new fields and make them a new keyword.
It's pretty much going to load everything in and activate all those changes that you've made. So IC32 is another step besides just the setup and after the fact when you run the IC800. This IC32 is where you put the keywords and their synonyms. And something that's very important is that you want to do it both ways. You don't just want to do cath to catheter, you also want to do catheter to cath. And the reason for that is because sometimes, especially if you're not utilizing description 3, you've got abbreviations. So someone could type in catheter and they wouldn't find cath. Whereas for the majority of people, they'll probably type in cath and you'll get catheter, but if you needed to use those abbreviations and you didn't have enough room, you want to make sure that you cover your bases.
Yeah, it's a nice catch-all, and Through the IC800, Lawson's creating its own keywords. So if you go in there today, you'll likely find a bunch. You just need to add your own synonyms. So this can easily be done in an upload, again, using your own abbreviation listings. It's a really great catch-all. I'm sure most of you have a very massive item master, even over 20,000 items. You want to have some sort of consistency, but sometimes those things can fall through the cracks, so why not help your requesters find the items that they're looking for a little bit easier and give you the opportunity to go back and correct those files. Then also, in the latest, greatest version of RQC Shopping, we have a new dashboard available. Pretty cool.
Yeah.
A lot of additional detail here right in the home screen. So this will bring their templates, whether or not they have any punch-out vendors available, their most recent requisitions, and their status, which I think is really cool. And then they also have a little graph there of a snapshot of all the requisitions that they've processed with their status. And it gives a quick start menu of their profile. So that's really helpful.
And do be aware when you do log into Requisition Center, if you've got the dashboards enabled, or rather set up for your version, it doesn't automatically go to this dashboard. So it's automatically still going to go to your profile as you're used to. The way to get here is by going to the home screen. That's how you get to this dashboard. So it's not automatic. It's not going to be your front end dashboard, but it's going to be available to you if you like to see everything in one spot.
Absolutely. So go back and update those instruction manuals and let your requesters know that it's available to them.
All right, so the search catalog, and this kind of piggybacks on the keyword search that we were talking about, but as you can see here, I typed in SYR, so I'm looking for a syringe, right? It's got a whole bunch of listings of synonyms or possibilities of things that I could have typed in. So this is something that activates that keyword search, and this is how your users are better finding their items, especially if they don't know the Lawson item number offhand. This particular screen, and it's something that will show you the setup for it, but as you'll notice, there's only 2 items that have a check plus, and what that's indicating is that it's a stock item from a specific IC12 location where you're getting your goods. But you'll notice that there are a bunch of items that don't have that, and the reason for that is because the setup is made so that you can see all items. So whoever this requester is has the ability to see all internal items, all maintained items from Lawson, not specifically just the IC12, where the next screenshot actually shows specifically if you have the IC12 setup enabled. So here you don't see any blanks. It has a check or a check plus depending if it's a non-stock or a stock item. So you can tell if it's something that's actually available to you at your IC12 location, and you can determine whether you want to make that ease. I would say it's easier for the requester to have it set up that way.
So this is all configured within the item list specific field area. So this can be done at a company level or by the requester level. So you have 3 different options in list only internal items. If you use no, it means that the system's wide open. So whether or not you have a PO25 agreement in place, whether or not it's finding pricing, it's going to show the requester everything. So a lot of detail, a lot of opportunity for error and requisition processing that you want to make sure that you have a list of exceptions and how to work through to resolve them for the requester. Some they may not see, and then they'll go into PO23 for the buyer to work through. So again, making sure you have a documented process if you're going to keep your search catalog wide open. If you switch that flag to yes, what it's going to do is only show you inventory items. So depending on the detailed profile from location, if that item is built in inventory, it's only going to show those items. So likely a much smaller subset of detail available. And then if you use I, it's considering that internal items. So again, it's looking at the detailed profile from location and trying to find all of the IC12 records that are available. So that's where you'll definitely see the check plus for inventory and the orange check mark if it's non-stock. Which also brings up a really good feature to talk about is having the check, the orange check and the green check plus. So the orange check mark is denoting that it's non-stock, but it's a little bit misleading because you can have an item that doesn't have an IC12 record that is non-stock that you have in your item master, but Lawson RQC is only considering it a non-stock with that orange check mark if it has an IC12 record. So if you're an organization that doesn't use IC12s for your non-stock except for in the situation where it was an inventory and you've converted it, you won't have that orange check mark available to you. So something to take note of with your training documentation to communicate to your customers. So we do have a question here. What version of RQC is the dashboard available on? And I'm pretty sure that was 10.06. Yeah, yep. All right.
If we both answer right, it means it's right? Okay, templates, sorry. I was just so proud. So leveraging templates. Templates are something that are made easier for your requesters because it creates a shopping list of items that they frequently purchase. So instead of going to the search catalog and looking for the same items over and over again, you can narrow down that list for them. Even if it could still be a couple hundred if you want it to be, but that's still a lot less than a few thousand, you know? So this is something that it's beneficial to take advantage of, and it's something that you can assign based on the requester themselves. So if only one requester uses it, they can be the only one to actually access that template. You can do it based on company, and you can also do it based on location. And the best way to actually, like this says, is the best way to create them is to talk with your requesters and but utilize the usage history of your items and what's commonly being ordered so that you can put that and use that to the best of your ability for them. This is where you actually can set up the PO15 where you can enter the templates, you can create them, you can add participants. Once the template is created, you can add the participants by going to that button, and you have to choose who is going to have access to it. So even if it's just one company or all of the companies, the only way to actually give them access is to enter something there. It's not like the RQ04 where you can just leave it wide open and they have access to everything. It doesn't work the same way. So you have to enter something in there. But this is the basis behind the scenes of how to add that in Mingle.
Yeah, so we've seen this maintained a variety of different ways. Some organizations choose to not allow requesters to search the catalog, and they have an internal process where the requester works directly with the buyer or someone in the MMIS team to maintain that template, to add new items to it. However, I've also seen organizations put this maintenance effort on the requester department themselves. So instead of giving them access to PO15, which, for not a super user that's in the system all the time, going in Portal S3 can be a little bit clunky at times. You have your header processing, and then you have your line level where you have to put that function code in. It can be a lot to ask for someone that's not in the system all the time to understand that concept. So within Requisition Center and the bookmark that's delivered, there's some special links available. So there's requester templates, location template, company template, and then there's admin level. So the requester can actually go into that same user interface as RQC Shopping and create a new template and add new items to that template. So again, something that you easily can implement, train your requesters on, and only give access to a certain subset of users. Maybe your OR and lab department, they're go-getters, they understand the system. You can trust that they're going to maintain their own templates, and you can hold them accountable to that. You can give them access to template maintenance. So really cool feature. I like utilizing it. You can print out a list of these templates, and also with version 10 with the new auditing features, you can audit template changes, which I know was one of the caveats in version 9. When you give the requester access, they could delete that template. So now you can kind of go back and see what may have happened. So pretty cool feature.
And that's just if you go back one more, sorry. This is just an example of what the template looks like to the requester so that you can see it. As you can see, company, location, and requester. Those are the different categories you can use, as we've mentioned. But it looks pretty similar to your search catalog, and they can, instead of just doing previous next and keep shuffling through all of the items, they can still use a search function within their template. So if they wanted to, they can just enter, and it works the same, but it only is segregated to your narrowed down shopping list that is your template.
And we do have a question here of what if you keep the from company and from location blank in the header of PO15, it won't let you create that template. You have to add one there. And then at the line level, you could override what the from company and from location is. But on the header level, it does require that detail. Hope that answered that question.
All right, so Halloween Express. This is the express order. So if you are using Lawson a lot and you've gotten accustomed to Requisition Center, maybe you've got a list of all of your Lawson item numbers written down. This is something that you might find useful. It is very simple and it's very basic, so it's kind of like the quick and dirty version of adding items to your shopping list. If you have the item number, you enter the item number and you enter the quantity, add. Simple as that. There's not much to it. However, if you don't know those Lawson item numbers, you can better utilize search catalog, your templates, or your special service if you don't have any item number at all. And then this is your special service. So if you are in search catalog and you're not finding what you need, there's nothing in your template, you don't know the Lawson item number, you're going to go to special service. And this is where you have to enter absolutely everything you know about the item. Odds are you probably have found that item or you have the catalog in front of you, so you should know a lot of information most of the time. And you'll need to enter an item description. You enter your quantity like you would any other location, but you do have to enter cost and things like your vendor and where you're going to charge these things to in your account, because those things aren't set up and they're not maintained in Lawson because there's no information for this particular item. And the more you put in, the better, because you want to make sure that your buyer understands exactly what you're going for. Most likely, they'll probably still contact you because you want to make sure that they're ordering the right thing. But something that you can actually do to help with that is this item space. Since you don't have a Lawson item number, you can put in paper if you want to, but a number is the best thing that you can do for your buyer, because that is concrete and that is something that they can go off of rather than just a vague description. You can use a description for your vague description if you like. So in your item, it's very helpful to put in something like your manufacturing number or your catalog number if that's what you have in there. So that can give them. Manufacturing is preferred because then if your company has better contract pricing with another vendor, they can get the same product, but maybe they can get better pricing. But if you only have the catalog number, that still can be extremely useful. So that would be something you want to consider. And something new right here is your cost option. And this is something that's been added recently in some of the newer versions, is that you don't have to put in a cost, so if it's no charge. So if it's something free but you need to order it or there's no cost to it, you can actually enter this in the cost option at the bottom. Before, you would have to add it to your shopping list, go back in, edit the line, change it to no cost. Kind of a hassle. So now this is something that's very beneficial and can make things a lot easier. However, if you don't know the cost at all, it's still a recommendation. Work with your organization, decide maybe a penny is your indicator that I don't know what the cost is, but I have to put something in here because Lawson requires it. So the penny indicates to the buyer, we don't know this cost, most likely it's not a penny, so that'll be like the red flag for them.
And we've definitely seen organizations work with those requesters that they have to contact the buyer prior to processing a requisition. Having a process behind that's really important to make sure that the right information is sent over and has less processing for the buyer who can help negotiate those costs. We've also seen vendor determine used for things like repairs on an instrument where the cost isn't known at the time, but the request still needs to be processed. And this will actually stop the receipt from occurring because it needs that price. So it's just a placeholder until the buyer can work through the request, change the price to cost required, and continue down its path. And Punch-Out, how exciting. So Punch-Out is pretty low effort to implement. You do need to work with your IT team to work on getting some certificates and also working with the vendor to make some configurations. So Infor has a listing of over 30 vendors, I believe, that you can work with that are approved, but you can certainly work with other vendors that are not on that approved listing. They just need the CXML website format, and it's sort of, you break it, you buy it. Infor may not support you through it. However, it's pretty easy to integrate the two. So what this is a way to go out to the vendor's website, utilize their catalog information, and bring it back into Lawson Requisition Center. So it takes the maintenance of items out of the picture. So I've seen this used very well for companies like Grainger and your office supplies. The one thing that you do have to keep in mind is, they don't store a lot of information that's required for your company. Things like your GL account. They don't know what number to charge it to, so then basically your requester is going to have to type that in every time. You don't want that, right? You want your requester to have a very simple process, easy to follow. So you can utilize things like your unspec codes and map that to a GL account unit, and then work with this vendor that you're using Punch-Out with, that they automatically send that number over to your system. So this is what it looks like in Requisition Center. It'll be a separate task available to them, so they may have search catalog, template, express order, and then they'd have a box for Punch-Out. And then here, depending on what Punch-Out vendors they have available to them, a logo will display, and they select which one they want to order to. And once they select this logo, it gives them a warning to let them know they're punching out, they're leaving their requester experience in Lawson and going out to the vendor's website. And here's what it looks like on Grainger's site here. And then once they hit submit cart, it's going to go all the way back into Requisition Center and populate all of those items, item detail and special service for them to then release. And then it's going to utilize your already existing approval workflow. It's going to process just like special service would today. But again, it enhances that requester experience and also the buyer, that purchasing experience, because it's giving them all the detail consistently the same way, no matter who's requesting. So this is all set up in RQ04. It also can be done at the company level, but this does have a separate license. So usually it's a smaller subset of requesters that you're working with.
And something to note for Punch-Out, in the past year or so, they've added Amazon Business Marketplace. So that's something that's very exciting for many, many organizations. So keep that in mind if you're interested, since it is one of the newer vendors.
Yes, and there is the approved vendor list available, which on one of our last slides, we have a Knowledgebase link with all the numbers. So definitely something helpful to take a look at. So the approver experience. So if you are utilizing requisition approvals today, there's a couple different things to think about with the latest and greatest version and with Mingle in mind. With Mingle, now there's the ability to link directly to your in-basket and Requisition Center right in those top links. So definitely something we'd recommend looking at. You also can utilize IPA to enhance the email notifications that are sent out. So you can have buttons for approve, reject, and unrelease. And also there's mobile notifications that can be utilized for approvals on the phone as well. The IPA notifications, you can really provide some more information. So if you're using process flow today, that email notification is probably pretty basic. It has requester information and maybe just the requisition total and item description and unit cost. Very, very simple. With IPA, it's really a great opportunity to take some more time to show some more detail. So who is the requester? Who are they ordering for? Where are they located? What's their telephone number? And more importantly, how about your item information? Especially for special service, where did they choose to charge this item? If you're using activities management, are they utilizing activity? Having the number is important, sure, but what's the name of that GL account unit? What's the name of that activity? To, again, help the requester have the information that they need to make a quick decision and not have to drill around to try to help them manage that budget a little bit closer. So I would highly recommend taking another look at your approval workflow and seeing how you can really enhance your customer experience for your requester and your approvers. Another thing that you can do is link to your imaging system. So if you're using, ImageNow or OnBase, and for your special service items, you want to allow them to attach a quote. We've worked on a lot of those projects to integrate with those systems and add a button to RQC. But you also can layer that into the requisition approval process to provide some links to the approver. So again, take some time to look back and see how you can enhance that experience for your customers. So here's this example of a very, very basic requisition email. And it does give a lot of detail and it's helpful, but why not spruce that up a bit? You can add some nice colors, your own company colors. You can add some additional details here. Have it all structured out in tables to bring their eyes to a particular piece of information. You also can display message history. So if I'm an approver, I want to know if I'm the third approver in line, who are the other two that approved it before me, and when did they approve it? Was it 2 days ago? How long has this rec been waiting for its final approval? To track that all the way through. So definitely worth the enhancement and investment.
Color is always a plus too.
Yes, looking nice and getting rid of that Times New Roman font.
Yeah,
there's something about it that really
much more exciting.
Yeah. So,
all right. So rec status empowerment. This is requisition status is something that your requesters can have access to, where it's a more detailed module, I guess is the right word. More detail module than your inquiry screen that you can use in Requisition Center. So Requisition Status, when you come in, it's something that you click from your drop-down in your bookmarks. And Requisition Status has a whole bunch of different ways to find requisitions, and it's got a lot of different detail. Very similar to the inquiry screen, but you can drill around. There's functionality with your process flow or your approval process. The little building blocks over on the right-hand side, you can actually see the levels of approval, where it's at, what its next step is. And then you can see the details. If you click on a requisition specifically, you can see the line information. You can see the PO if it's been put on one. You can tell that the buyers actually put it on a PO and the process has been started. But what's really great about the requisition status is that you can see everyone's. So it's not just yours. So when you go into requisition status, it automatically defaults to you because it is you and it assumes you want to look at yours, right? But no. That's not what we're going to do, right? We're going to delete that requester because Joe Schmo down the hallway is out for the day and he ordered something for me, but I want to know where it is. I want to know what's going on because it's urgent and I need it as soon as possible, so I'm going to track it. I'm just going to delete this requester, and I can either choose a different way of narrowing it down, or I can put Joe Schmo's requester ID in there and I can see where he's been ordering. Granted, I don't know where I was going now with it. When you just start and then just lose it. But this is definitely easy because you can look at other people's, you can see if someone's out, and you can see where they're, the status of their items and if they're on POs specifically.
Yeah, and that's a good point. We have heard some concerns. Well, why would I want to open that up? Everyone's going to see each other's requisitions. Well, if you really have a requester drilling around that detail and changing all their parameters, what is that hurting? that's the pricing for your organization. And I personally find it's really helpful, back order situations, recalls, for them to be able to do some due diligence on their side without having to necessarily contact purchasing to check in with another department. You know, let's say your OR is having a back order, they're running low on supplies, and they want to check in with the cath lab or another hospital in your organization to see if they're utilizing the same item. So it gives the requester a little bit more empowerment. I found that not a lot of them go and drill into everyone's and are up on everyone's business. But it can help to have more information out there and to help them be a part of the process and be a little bit more accountable to find that detail on their own.
And the requisition line status is very similar to the rec status. As you can see, it's just for the lines. So this is mostly beneficial if you're looking up a specific item and you don't know what requisition it's on and you want to find that out. This is your best chance. So it's got an item field, whereas rec status does not have that option. So you can just type in the item and you can look things up. But it also gives you the geo distributions, and you can see the PO status, the drill around information, whether it's been released, canceled, anything like that.
Great. And we have had a few questions that I missed. I'm sorry, we're on a roll here. So if you're on the cloud, does Infor do the punch-out setup? Would they not do one if it wasn't on their list? So I believe that Infor will assist with configuring punch-out, but it's really on the functional side to work directly with that vendor to make sure it's the right catalog list, all of the coding's the right way. The configuration on the IT side is pretty minimal. It's a registration of the certificate that's required, and RQC configuration is updated with basically some login details to connect the two systems. I believe that they would not allow you to have a custom vendor there, but I can't speak for them, so that'd be definitely something to open up an Infor Extreme case on to ask that question, and we'll certainly do the same so we add it to the next presentation. And then we had another question, are the document links part of RQC version 10, or do you need image now? Lawson does allow you to basically copy and paste a URL link, so you don't necessarily need to integrate with the imaging system. I would definitely recommend it just for user experience and processing and maintenance, but just to be creative, if you were, a smaller organization where that may not be, that level of management isn't necessary, you could save the document to a shared drive and then basically copy and paste that link into the attachments area. That does bring up a good point. Basically, using IPA for those approvals, if it can connect to the requisition in some way or another, you can display that on the email itself. So if you're utilizing comments or, again, that attachments area, that could be brought in and displayed on that approval email. Then we had another question. All of our templates are a combination of stock and non-stock items, and we do not use the from company and from location at the header. We have no problems, correct. But you still need the from company and from location on the header, even though the system ignores it, right? So it's just a setup requirement. Same thing for par carts. It needs something on the header to refer to in the instance that the line level detail is not there. If the line level detail is there, it's going to override the header detail. Okay. Sorry, I went a little farther.
Receiving self-service. So this is kind of like Requisition Center for receivers. So it's got the same kind of look and feel, and it's very user-friendly. It's a little more basic than your behind the scenes if you were using PO30, but it still has the same functionality. So the nice part is that you can actually filter on partially received or no receipts. So if you're looking at specific ones, you can get in there. And then you still can enter your quantities, cancel back orders, choose which ones you're actually adding, and then just release it. And it's very simple, it's very straightforward. However, even though it has this functionality, you're still not able to do inspections or adjustments in receiving self-service, so you'll still need to do that in PO33 and PO34 in Mingle, outside of the receiving self-service.
So we've seen a lot of organizations use this in healthcare. If you have some direct shipment medical practices, let's say, this can be really, really helpful since you don't necessarily want to use the drop ship functionality because you want to have that three-way match. However, right now you may have a process where that requester receiver is scanning that packing list and emailing it, or just trying to work on an outside process outside of Lawson, and then having someone in your main loading dock area receive that product. So receiving self-service can take that out of the equation. You could certainly work with security to only allow them to see certain ship to areas. And this is actually, the link is available within the Requisition Center bookmark. So work with your IT team to drill in more to that Requisition Center bookmark. If you're looking at it today and you don't see that link, it's because there's actual security within the bookmark manager that's not allowing you to see that bookmark. So receiving self-service, requisition status, requisition line status. There's also a utilities area to refresh the cache. That's all available within that Requisition Center bookmark. It has specific links out. So work with your IT. Okay. So implementation considerations. Think of what your best practices are. What are your business needs? What types of goods do you want to allow your requesters to purchase? Do you need special approval processes depending on what item type you are selecting? Really make sure that you have a meeting with your stakeholders and, don't just think of, well, how is purchasing managing all of this information? Bring some requesters in. Make sure you bring your receivers in. Get everyone in the same room and try to map out all of these different scenarios. So you may find, okay, it's an inventory item. It's already approved. We always have a price for it. We don't need approvals for those requisitions. It's not good value for our approvers to try to manage through those processes. But let's say if it's a non-stock and it's over, a certain dollar amount, you do want it to go for approval. And special service, of course, you want those to go through approvals. So you can configure all of that within IPA. So it's really helpful to just make sure you have everyone in the room and they're engaged and think more about the process. And focus on your roles and responsibilities. Don't just think of the employee working on that task today. Think a little bit more big picture on what really they should be focusing on. So do you want your buyers to be managing those non-stock purchase orders? Do they need to look at them before they go out to the vendor? Likely not, because you have the price, you have all the item detail maintained, and perhaps you're using, if you're utilizing GHX, you're using the order center through exception management to try to go back and catch any of those issues that may have occurred. But for special service, you really want your buyer, your purchasing agent, your contract analyst to have more input and be a part of that processing. So do you want them working it in PO23? Do you actually want them a part of the approval process where they're working it in basket before it even gets to PO23? Make sure you think of all these things, and certainly you can work with us here at RPI to help you map out all of those finite details to bring it all together. Another thing to think about is how your users are getting into the system. So do you want them to be able to select a link from your intranet site to go straight to RQC? Or do you want them to log into Portal and hit one of those links to go shopping so they're a part of the experience? So this is really a business decision. Are you utilizing LBI today to have an HR dashboard? Are they already used to going into Lawson Portal S3 to access details? If so, you probably want to have a bookmark in Mingle instead. So just some things to think about. And then RQC licenses. So there is licensing, and Infor does audit this information and asks for detail about how many active requesters that you have. So, if you're bringing on new facilities or new requesters, make sure you take this into consideration. And also, utilize some policies you already have in place today from your IT side of the house. Like for Active Directory, how long do they wait before they inactivate a user? So having some guidelines in your organization, has it been 6 months since they placed an order? And if so, go through the process of inactivating them, and then you can kind of recycle some of those licenses in a way. In healthcare especially, you may have instances where the requester is a backup, but if they haven't processed a requisition in 6 months, it's not very likely that they're backup that consistently, and the effort to quickly reactivate the requester ID and have IT change that requester identity, it's pretty quick. So having a management process of that is definitely helpful. So here we have some examples of what mapping out all of those business processes look like. So here we have some business rules. So again, if it's inventory, it doesn't require approval. If it's non-stock or special, it does. If it exceeds 24 hours, I want a reminder email to go out. If it exceeds 48 hours, I want it to escalate to the next level and let that next level know that it escalated because no one answered it. Talking all these things out. So again, you're taking the time to hear out and think of your approver and your requester and what their experience looks like. If you make it better for them, they're more likely to make it better for you in purchasing and supply chain. And then we also have just a quick and easy, well, not always easy, as you probably know, but a workflow, kind of swim lanes of who's handling what part of that process. And for approvals, again, understand your own business processes. What are your own hierarchy needs? Do you already have a hierarchy in place today for HR or invoicing that you can utilize for your requisition approvals? Not recreate the wheel. Like I was talking about in some of the earlier slides, where do you want your purchasing team to review these requests? Do you want them a part of the approval workflow? Do you want to sit in PO 23 for them to work? Do you want to create an unreleased PO for them to work? And how are you going to manage that? Thinking of your IPA, enhancing those email notifications. Thinking a little bit more about line versus header approvals. I haven't seen, in my lifetime at least so far, I haven't seen line approvals utilized. That just means that the approver actually needs to approve each and every line of that requisition. I've seen more organizations just use header and handle by exception. So if the approver saw one item they didn't want the requester to order, they would unrelease that requisition and communicate to that requester, hey, remove line 3 for this item. We're not ordering that anymore. And then they can re-release from there and keep that same requisition number. And then you can do things like leverage RQ02, which is an approval code used for a different approval process that not many organizations are using today to handle those exceptions. So we were talking earlier about inventory and non-stock and special type items and having different workflows for them. But what about your departments? So we all know your OR, your cath lab, they're ordering very expensive items, and it's very easy for them to exceed that dollar limit. And those poor approvers are just trying to keep up with the pace and trying to escalate some of those requests before others if they're urgent or overnight. So you can work with that smaller subset of requesters, code them a certain way, and then build your workflow around checking for those things. So yes, it's a non-stock item, and yes, the requisition total exceeds $20,000, but this requester is in the OR, so we're going to allow it because it's an approved item and it's under their approval limit of $50,000. But once it goes past that, go to the approver. So there's some creative things that you can do to kind of work through those exceptions that you have a good process for and they are maintained and monitored. And then also thinking PO codes are another thing that they can be your friend to optimize that workflow. So, if you're trying to integrate capital requisitions, you can have a special PO code, and then the workflow can be built to process that requisition to a different hierarchy or follow different business rules. Okay. Here we have our project approach, which is just basically a quick summary of all the things that we just spoke about. So really focusing on gathering the requirements, having that stakeholder meeting, and then focusing on the build, which is the first section that we talked about. Who do you want to allow to do what? Who requires approval? What kind of keywords are you going to have? And see if you want to integrate some item images. And then working through your testing, training your users, and then making sure you have a good support plan to follow.
Your build-only features, this is something that you can add to Requisition Center. You have to actually implement it and have it turned on and set up if you're using it. It's very beneficial for implants and dropship and things like that. You can enter all of the procedure information if you want that, and it'll go through the requisition to the PO, etc.
There's some additional configuration that needs to be done, just like Brittany noted. We have a Knowledgebase article that's at the end of this presentation that you can copy down. So this is just basically how it's going to process on the purchase order, and if you're utilizing EDI, whether or not you wanted to mask certain information. This will actually carry over into the PO, and even if you're not using Requisition Center and allowing the requester to enter it themselves, the buyer can do it themselves within the purchase order. And some new bill codes have been added to the PO 100 for processing. So some common issues to keep in mind when you have RQC implemented or you're using particular configurations. We talked about this a little bit earlier. If you're on an earlier version of Portal and RQC, you can have that RQ04 account unit issue where you basically need to override and create change multiple instances of that RQ04 record. So just keep that in mind. If you have any unreleased agreements in PO25, this can cause errors in Requisition Center, so making sure that you have a process to monitor those. If you have any kind of process where you're deleting unreleased requisitions, you have someone in your MMIS team or purchasing, your requesters have gone in and out and it's an unreleased rec from 3 months ago and they go and delete it in RQ10, it can cause issues for the requester next time they log in, that the DBA actually has to get rid of some cookies within the server detail. So something to keep in mind. RQC has a separate cache, which is a part of the utilities bookmark or link within the RQC bookmark. Then we also have editing unreleased requisitions when grayed out. So this is another thing to make sure that you have a part of your training manuals and communicate to your requester. If they are in RQC shopping and they go to inquire and they open up a previous requisition, it says view only all across the screen. They look at the requisition, they close out. Next time they open up Requisition Center, it's still on that requisition that they're viewing, and they don't know how the heck to get out of it. So you just hit new on the bottom right-hand corner and it will bring it right back to
If
profile.
you ever exit out of Requisition Center and you didn't release it, it's going to be on the same exact requisition that you were looking at, whether you inquired on it or you started a whole new one. So keep that in mind. You're always in a requisition, essentially.
Absolutely. So we have some key takeaways.
Be careful when you're setting things up because it pretty much decides how your requesters view things and actually function and use the requisition center. Consider punch out because it's very efficient. It helps lower your maintenance costs, and having someone actually personally maintaining something, your outside vendors can do that for you. Also leverage your IPA because it's very beneficial to have that approval flow in there, and you have the ability to approve what goes through to the PO and what actually gets bought. Utilize these bill-only features. They're very new to version 10, but they're very helpful, especially if you use a lot of dropship or you find the bill only useful. And then a huge thing is that when you actually do implement Requisition Center, make sure that you communicate well with your requesters. Make sure that there is ample training close to when it's actually being used, not too many months out, because that can, people will forget. Utilize videos, utilize papers, utilize online documents, anything that can help.
Absolutely. They are your customers and you have lots of them, right? So make sure you really focus on them and enhance that experience, because again, they're only going to make your job and processing easier if you invest in that. So here we have some helpful knowledge-based articles to share. We didn't get into item images much, but there's a really, really helpful document from Infor that talks through all of that. Also how to require and hide fields, how to configure the MSCM integration, and that punch-out vendor list. So I think we already went through all the questions as they were being asked, so looks like we're right on an hour.
Yeah.
Nice work, guys. So want to thank Stephanie, Brittany, for a great presentation. I want to thank all of you for attending, especially all of you that are still here. If you're interested, there's another presentation on contract management best practices tomorrow with Brent Bauer.
Absolutely.
You can find that on rpic.com/webinars. For December webinars, which are not published yet, we're going to do something more detailed on bill only, and we should also be doing something on strategic sourcing. And lastly, if you go to YouTube and search for RPI Consultants, you can find all our recorded webinars on there. Thank you very much for attending. Hope to see you again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.